Hello everyone, this is Adicon Podfic, back with another podfic. Today I'll be reading The Storm That Unfolded by Rain is Falling 13. This will be Chapter 16, A Wasting Nanami's Time. Summary. Nanami reflects on what he knows about one Percy Hayashi, and then is summoned to rescue him on a mission gone wrong. Well, that is, if Percy needed saving. Let's jump right into it. Kento Nanami liked to think he had a pretty good balance between instinct and intellect when it came to making decisions. He relied on his gut, but more so he relied on reason, logic, and calculated certainties. He saw things for what they were and made decisions based on facts, not speculation. Which was why Percy Hayashi bothered him so much. It seemed that no matter how much he observed, how many reports he analyzed, nothing seemed to add up. Kento had been on a handful of missions with him, nothing major, just lower to mid-grade infestations. Most of the time, Hayashi used his hands or a dagger, a curious mix of Aikido, something he recognized as akin to a Roman style of sword fighting, and many other moves that came from a place or places unknown. Joint locks, throws, redirections, stabs, and slashes that sent curses slamming into the pavement or snapping their own limbs from force. The style was controlled, precise, yet fluid and easily adaptable, perfectly suited for someone who fought being stronger than himself with a variety of situations. But every so often, water would appear. Not often, not in any consistent or obvious way, but it was there, a sharpened edge of liquid where his hands should have been empty, a sudden burst of force that shouldn't have been possible with pure strength alone, a slickness underfoot where there had been dry ground moments before. Kento had felt the difference himself once. A curse had lunged at him, and in the moment it should have bitten into his flesh, its body jerked unnaturally to the side, as if something unseen had cut through it. A heartbeat later, water glistened at its wound, a faint residue evaporating too quickly to be normal. It hadn't felt like cursed energy, and really, that was what he fixated on the most. That was why he held Hayashi even further than arm's length. Even more than his other colleagues. The, the little he did know about the man made no sense, and was completely different to how a sorcerer's powers normally works. Everything in their world revolved around cursed energy. Even those with little of it still had something, a trace, a presence, a weight to their existence that aligned them with Jujutsu society. But Hiyashi, he was like a ghost, appearing from seemingly nowhere with no formal training, and the way he moved, the way his water-based techniques worked, it was different to anything he'd seen or heard of. He could not fathom how the man's powers worked, given the barest residue of cursed energy it contained and how quickly it seemed to vanish. Sure, some of it carried a trace of cursed energy, but the fact that he could use his powers without leaving any residual presence was both unnatural and unnerving. Especially because there were children involved. As their teacher, he had responsibility to them and their safety, and while he personally had little interest in the man and was content in keeping away from him, the concerns of the students, both voiced and unheard, mattered to him. So for them, he needed to know this man's psyche, and what kind of threat he might one day pose. Kento had therefore observed Hayashi outside of the missions they'd shared together, the way he kept to himself, how he would avoid participating in conversations unless directly called on, the way he deflected questions with humor, redirected attention away from himself when passed, either through a vague response or an outright, I don't want to talk about it feel. In fact, the only time Kento really saw him engage in any meaningful way was in combat, and in his Aikido training session with the students every morning. Occasionally, he caught himself watching them, seeing how the students began to pick up the techniques and fold them into their own styles. Hayashi had a quiet patience when teaching. He corrected stances with a firm but steady hand, demonstrating throws with practiced ease, and a handful of analogies for anyone who might not understand the first one he provided. Kento could admit it easily. The man was a great teacher. No one could deny that. He'd even heard through Gojo and Itadori that he'd been having regular personalized sessions with Toge, and even that he had been helping Itadori in understanding his relationship with Sukuna's powers. Sure, he'd been roped into attending movie night and occasionally cooking dinner, but when he wasn't teaching anyone or held to a social situation, he was either on his own, in the library, or out on some mission. Kento could respect that. He was the same, but it made things more complicated all the same. So, it was clear that Hiyashi was comfortable in motion, in fighting, in battle, but when it came to trusting others, he remained firmly on the defensive, and Kento understood why that was the worst part. He had no proof, no evidence of what he knew Hiyashi had to be keeping secret. He could tell in the way that the man walked, how he held himself in a quiet, calm, yet highly alert manner, in the way he fought. It was the look of someone who had learned to survive. Kento wasn't blind to what that meant. He'd seen enough to recognize the signs of someone shaped by survival, someone for whom trust was not a default but a risk. That understanding didn't bring him closer to the truth, but it did complicate his response. He wasn't suspicious in the traditional sense. He didn't think Hayashi meant them harm, but the unknown, especially one that operated outside the normal parameters of Jujutsu, was always worth paying attention to. They hadn't wanted to put the man under any kind of real questioning. It would only make him more defensive, less cooperative, and that would be a step back they couldn't afford here. Subtlety was key, a naturally curious gentleness, gentle press that would result in Hayashi volunteering the information before too long. Well, that was the plan, at least. But in the meantime, they had done some research on him. But Hayashi really appeared like a ghost, a silent traveler showing up to help, then disappearing again. No name before his adoption, no presence outside the Aikido championships. Kento felt like he developed a headache every time he thought about Percy Hiyashi. The fact the Kamo clan were interested in claiming him too didn't help, and he could only question what would happen if he turned them down, or if he joined them. Either way it could be a complete disaster. Essentially an outsider with no previous ties to sorcerer society, elemental powers unlike anything a sorcerer should have, and a past that no one knew but the man himself. Kento wondered if Gojo's revelation might happen after all, albeit with an entirely different trigger than expected. He rubbed his fingers against his temples and sighed. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Ichichi stood there, looking tense. Nanami-san, we need to deploy immediately. Kento straightened, collecting the papers littered about his desk. What's the situation? It's the case Hayashi was assigned to, Ichichi said, voice uneasy. The infestation was just updated to include a special grade. Kento's expression didn't shift, but internally, something in his chest went cold. Another one. And Hayashi. The silence he received was answer enough. Nothing. But his mind had the chance to recall the fact Hayashi had only been found because he killed a special grade. He was moving out the door. Some things were best never left to chance. Kento had seen the aftermath of a battle with curses more times than he cared to remember. More often than not, buildings special grade combat were destined for demolition before the dust settled, and the sorcerer typically expedited the process. So when he got off the train and made his way through the streets, he expected to come face to face with a pile of rubble, everything from the building itself to the streets outside in ruins. He expected the sight and smell of bodies. Casualties were usually a given when it came to special grades, the body parts littered around, blood and human waste splashed on every surface. He expected cursed energy to be thick in the air, almost choking in its stench. Instead, he saw none of this. In fact, one would hardly know a battle had taken place at all. Everything was still clean and in one piece. Before he saw all that, though, the first thing he noticed, there was no veil. A veil was always cast before battle, for a multitude of reasons, first and foremost being to shroud the area from normal humans. Kento kicked himself for not being certain whether Hayashi could call one or not, but regardless, his assistant, who would have provided him the report and brought him here, would have. So the lack of a veil was the first sign something was off. The mission parameters had been clear, after all. Hayashi had been deployed to investigate an area where civilians had gone missing, a suspected nest of mid-grade curses. The veil should still be up, sealing off the space until the job was done. If it had lifted already, that meant one of two things. 1, Hayashi was dead, or 2, that all the curses, including the newly reported special grade, were dead. Kento adjusted his gloves, stepping past where the boundary should have been, and made his way inside the abandoned industrial building, prime territory for curses to fester. The air inside should have been heavy with residual energy. Instead, it was still, not cleansed, not purified, just absent of the expected stench. It was as if something had came through and erased all traces of it entirely, not just cleaned away, as if it were never there. His steps echoed against the concrete as he moved deeper into the structure. The lights were flickering, but they were still on. Another anomaly. Special grades rarely left infrastructure intact. Their battles warped the environment, disrupting electricity, crackling foundations, leaving trails of destruction and decay in their wake. But here, the walls were unmarked, save for a few marks and splatters of water. Water, Kento noted, not blood, which shimmered underneath the flickering lights. Puddles of water dotted the floor, but in an abandoned building they were kind of expected. Though they should be innocuous, Kento couldn't shake the feeling it was watching him. Maybe it was. He thought he'd seen one or two of the little water-made creatures watching them after all. Then there were the bodies. Kento slowed as he reached the first, a mid-grade curse, its body intact but lifeless. Its torso was riddled with small, precise punctures, as if it had been skewered by dozens of razor-thin needles. The wounds were crystalline, lined with frost that hadn't yet melted. He found another a few steps ahead, this one split cleanly in half. Not jagged, not torn, a perfect surgical separation, as though an impossibly fine blade had passed through it in a very controlled, calculated manner. Kento exhaled slowly, then pressed forward. There were more bodies, each one seemingly taken down in a different way. Some were cut apart, others impaled, and a few, disturbingly, had no external wounds at all. Their bodies were bloated, frozen from the inside out. Their insides ruptured as if the very fluids in their system had expanded past their limits. Kento had seen many ways to kill a curse. These were not standard or even special jujutsu techniques. Curses also tended to wither away or vanish as they were exercised, and yet these ones appeared at various stages of decay, like they had actually died. His grip tightened around his weapon as he finally stepped into what had likely been the main battleground, and there, standing at the center of the room, was Percy Hayashi. Kento stopped at the threshold, scanning the scene. The special grade was, or had been, massive. Its corpse was sprawled across the far side of the room, its grotesque form contorted in death. Unlike the others, this one was significantly more damaged. But still, the destruction was perfectly precise. Its limbs were severed cleanly, deep, smooth cuts carved through its body at all and every odd angle, as if it had been dismantled piece by piece. At its core, its torso was hollow. Something had caved in its chest, crushing it from the inside. Kento's brows furrowed slightly. The lack of destruction was unnatural. The curse was massive, special grade, and yet the building still stood. The floor still held firm beneath his feet. There were signs of a struggle, and deep claw marks on the walls where the curse had lashed out. Furniture upturned and shattered, but none of it felt like the result of an all-out battle between a lone sorcerer and a special grade. There were no collapsed ceilings, no gaping holes where a body had been thrown through a wall, no sign that the fight had escalated to anything beyond tightly controlled precision. The only damage that seemed remotely environmental were the burst pipes near the far wall, likely the source of the dampness clinging to the air and the water pooling in uneven streaks across the floor. If anything, it felt more like a surgical dissection than a battle. His eyes shifted to Hayashi, standing amidst it all like it was just another day at the office. His shoulders rose and fell in an even breath, movements loose and unhurried. His clothes were torn, soaked in blood, surely his, though none of his visible injuries seemed remotely fresh, but his stance was relaxed, as if he hadn't just gone head-to-head with a special grade alone. Kento watched Hayashi exhale slowly, rolling his shoulders and glancing over his shoulder, immediately zeroing in on Nanami and catching his eye. "Oh," his lips quirked, lazy and unbothered. "You made it." Kento didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on the corpse before flicking back to Hayashi, who, notably, looked entirely unscathed, even despite the blood soaking into his t-shirt and pants. He moved like someone entirely uninjured, and at the very least there was no gushing blood or exposed bones. His breathing was even, his stance relaxed. Definitely not the usual posture of someone who had battled against a special grade, at least unless you were Gojo. It was clear Hayashi wasn't in any immediate danger, but procedure was procedure. "Are you injured?" Hayashi smirked. "Not anymore. Disappointed?" Kento exhaled through his nose, stepping past Hayashi to get a closer look at the corpse. The hall was eerily quiet, this kind of silence that only came after something violent and terrible had already passed through. His eyes swept over the scene, cataloguing every detail with clinical precision. Nothing about it was what he expected, which meant it deserved more than just his full attention. "The fight should have left more of a mess," he said finally, his tone measured, observational. Special grades don't tend to go down so cleanly. He didn't phrase it as a question, didn't give Hayashi anything to latch on to or deflect. He simply stated the fact, made it clear he had noticed. Hayashi stretched cheekily, unbothered. "Guess I'm just that good." Kento didn't raise the debate. He merely gave a slight hum in response, casting one last glance around the room before making his way back towards the exit. "We should report back. Tell them it's safe for civilians to re-enter the zoned area, and the report will need revising. Your version of events when you're ready." Hayashi fell into step beside him, and for now, Kento let the matter rest. He didn't have all the pieces yet, but there was no point in forcing answers that wouldn't come willingly. Not yet. And that is the end of chapter 16. I know we haven't hit 15 minutes yet. Whatever, I'm cutting it off here. So, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to ramble about? I went to the library yesterday, and I checked out a book called A League of Lady Poisoners, and my parents have been looking at me weird all day. Because they were like, specifically one time I was like, I'm gonna go read A League of Lady Poisoners, and they were like, you better not be planning to actually poison anyone. So that was fun. I think it's because of my overall morbid interests. I mean, I want to become either a pathologist, a forensic pathologist, or a forensic toxicologist. So, pretty morbid overall. Oh, I'm going on a college tour on Friday and Saturday with some people from the local community college. They're taking us to one of the bigger ones nearby. Well, not nearby, it's like a 3-hour drive, but to like go check out the college and stuff, and it's gonna be fun. Oh, also, I started track. Woo, yippee, I'm doing another sport besides volleyball now. Yay. And actually, it is so much easier than volleyball. It is so much easier than volleyball. I've had like a week's worth of practices, and I've only gotten so out of breath that I could barely breathe like twice. um, and it's a lot more fun. And like, I've got a bunch of friends doing it, so I'm not alone the whole time. I get to actually talk to people. And like, it's a lot of fun. I would never quit volleyball. I mean, my coach has so much hope in me. But yeah, I'm doing track now, and that's fun. And then is there something else? Oh, me and my girlfriend's 2 year anniversary is coming up like next month? Yeah, I think it's next month. So I've got a friend's birthday at the end of this month, which I need to make something for. Got 2 year with my girlfriend next month, and then um oh, me and one of my friends decided that our trumpets are getting married, like as a joke, but also it's great. And we are going to have a ceremony during the next concert where they actually get married. And we've got an officiant, a ring bearer, a flower girl. We've got everything. It's great. I still need to make the metaphorical rings that aren't so metaphorical because they are actual objects. They're just not technically rings. Um Oh, I've been writing more of a fic. And oh, I had like I already knew this, but I had like a revelation that one of the many reasons, because there are a lot, but this is one of them, why the human mind is better than AI is because AI has filters. The human mind doesn't. Um I have used ChatGPT in the past to like create little scenes for me. I've never posted it anywhere. I've never paid anything for ChatGPT and I've never had it generate images. I just sometimes like to play around and find out what it's willing to do for me. And one of the things it is not willing to do for me is gore of almost any kind, even minor blood, and it'll cut me off. Um, but me, my own mind, I can write somebody bleeding out as much as I want to. Um, the fic I'm working on right now is going to have an actual vivisection where somebody is dissected while they are still alive and conscious. AI would never let me do that. Um, I thought I'd mention because I thought it was a fun little revelation. Well, not really a revelation because I already knew it, but I thought it was a fun little thing that I was able to put into words. Um, hmm. What else is there? I feel like I should have more to talk about. Anyway, thank you all for listening to my goofy little ramble. I will. Oh, one more thing. So last week, I did not post last week because Sunday when I went to record, Ao3 was down, and so I couldn't. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna wait till next week. So that's what I did. So I'm sorry I didn't post last week. Ao3 was down. I couldn't really do much about it. Um, so I just decided to postpone a week, give myself a little break. But we're back, and as long as AO3 isn't down, I don't have my entire Saturday taken up, or I don't get sick or anything. We'll be back until one of those happens. Um, anyway, bye. Thank you for listening to my little ramble. I hope you all have a good day or night wherever you are, and I will see you next week. Bye!